Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and in this video I'm going to walk you through what the difference is between a small pen and a big pen. Essentially, all it means when somebody refers to a small pen or a big pen is the size of the tip on the pen. And that might seem sort of duh, but it's a question I get all the time and it does need a little bit of explanation. The best and clearest example that we can look at for these are these two Tombow pens. So we have a Tombow dual brush and a Tombow Fudenosuke. These two are both really popular brush pens, but they're completely different sizes. So if I take the top off of both of these pens and you look at the tips of them, you can totally see that there's a huge difference between the small one and the big one. One has a really big tip and one has a really small tip, and that's kind of the telltale sign that it's a small or big pen, but it does get a little more complicated than that. So if you look at a small pen and I was to draw a stroke with this one, if I just did a really light upstroke and a really hard downstroke, those are about the thicknesses you'll see. But if I used a big pen, you would have your upstroke quite a bit thicker and your downstroke way thicker. And so that's the difference in using these two totally different sizes tips. And where that comes into play is when you work with pre-made calligraphy workbooks like mine, wink wink, you'll see a lot of instructors that'll do a small pen version or a big pen version. And the important thing is that you know which pen you have so that you can use it on the right type of workbook. So these are two of my workbooks, and they are made for two different types of pens. One is for big pens and one is for small pens. And so if we were to look at, let's say, this letter M, this one is scaled for using small pens, whereas this one is scaled much bigger for using big pens. And if you were to try and use a small brush pen on this workbook, your downstrokes would not be thick enough. Whereas vice versa, and what I see more commonly, is people trying to use a big pen on a small pen workbook, and you'll end up with really thick strokes that don't match what's on the traceables. So that's really important to know. So generally speaking, anything that falls within this sort of range is going to be considered a small tip brush pen. And anything that falls within this range is going to be considered a big tip or a large tip. There are some brush pens that fall as sort of an in-between size though, and in that case I always recommend that you go to the larger size workbooks or the larger size drawing with them, because the bigger the tip, the harder it's going to be to control. And so if you try and use a slightly bigger tip on the small tip brush pen pages, you're going to have sort of a disaster. So some of the examples of that one are this Faber-Castell pen. This one I get asked about all the time, and I would tell you honestly that I don't actually really like this pen. So if you're using this one, see if you can find something else. But if this is your only option, I definitely would consider this a big tip. Even though the tip of it is pretty small, it's really flexible. And so generally the more flexible and the bigger the tip, the harder it is to use. So just go in the bigger scale. Same thing with this Micron brush pen. It's like bristly. Anything bristly is going to be harder to control. And speaking of that, if you wanted to use a paintbrush too, I would consider that a large tip. And again, some of them are hard to tell, but the minute they're really any bigger than this Tombow Fudenosuke tip, I would consider it a large tip and just go slightly bigger. Okay, so that's it for now. Hopefully that explanation was helpful. And if you want my recommendations of all my favorite brush pens, and actually all my favorite tools for that matter, I'm going to link to my free 50-page supplies guide down below and you can check it out. Make sure you hit like on this video if it was helpful, subscribe to the channel because I put 2 new videos out every single week, and I'll see you next time.